Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Franco, your host for Frank Analysis. It's been a while since I've done one of these streams, and you guys read the title. We're gonna talk about how people are waking up. People are taking action. People are starting to be more consistent with their moral principles, and like they've had it. Like they're not gonna vote for Democrats anymore. A lot of people who are, of course, I'm talking about the Palestine issue and what's happening, the genocide that's happening there on behalf of um, Israel, right? The 80 years of occupation on Palestine, and people are having it. I'm seeing that people who were still supporting a lot of these progressive politicians, quote unquote progressive politicians, are done with them because they're exposing themselves as Zionists. I'm seeing people are done with celebrities. People are waking up to the fact of how Hollywood is infiltrated with Zionists, how corporations are Zionists. More people are starting to wake up to this, and with the atrocities that are being amplified recently, they are choosing to boycott these corporations, and I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful to see people are taking action this way. People are organizing this way. I was on the ground in DC 2 weeks ago with 300,000 other people protest, like in front of the White House. People were chanting "Genocide Joe." Like I am of a strong belief that people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 are not going to vote for him again because of this. It's really great to see this. Today, yeah, we're pretty much going to get into that. How people are becoming even more critical of independent media. I think that a lot of these people that are independent media, they have presented a lot of useful information in the past. But there's just been so much tribalism recently, and a lot of the commentators, and I voiced this before, a lot of the commentators are really interested in becoming famous, in putting their desire for fame and turning this into a career ahead of their moral principles, and that's why you see a lot of inconsistencies. And I want to give a shout out to Glory Jones and the Flame of Liberation. They have a video that premiered earlier today at noon, talking about how people who were critical of Rage Against the War Machine were pretty much vindicated. At least when those that were not coming at it from like a shitlib perspective. People like myself, people like Glory Jones, people like the Flame of Liberation, and the other people that were on my panel a couple months ago, we were talking about how there's pro-war speakers at this rally. We had Tulsi Gabbard there. We had RFK Jr. And rather than holding these people accountable with some of their other stances, with which we're going to get into and look at in a bit, like their stances on Israel, how they're Zionists, that was not getting called out. But yeah, let's get into that. I want to start by just showing you how on TikTok, a lot of normies are using TikTok now, and it's been a place where a lot of people are becoming more educated, and the ruling class are becoming so afraid of that. They want to censor TikTok. All right, so let's share here. What's up, Extra Bola? And I just want to give a shout out to some people who are in the chat right now. We got Peace Dove. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that first letter. Kame Kate. What's up, Extra Bola? It's nice to see you, brother. All right, so let me share my screen here. All right, so yeah, Bernie Sanders. People are completely done with him, and these are the politicians that people were supporting just 3 years ago in 2020. And now it's like there's no one for people to like support now for president. People are waking up to how it's like BS, how voting is BS, how at the end of the day we're still going to have the same BS no matter who is in office, because these people are not really in control. Whoever's controlling them is making them have these Zionist or pro-war positions. And even Bernie had some pro-war positions because he thought he had to do this in order to become president. So yeah, this is showing Bernie the good coward. So in 1988, it is wrong that the United States provides arms to Israel, but we sometimes concentrate too much on Israel. Jordan still has an autocracy. So a lot of this stuff was right under our noses. We weren't paying attention. But now with what's going on in Palestine, people are looking back and are exposing the history of people like Bernie Sanders. And I mean, don't get me wrong, his movement did help wake up a lot of people, myself included. But we shouldn't stay attached to these people. Same thing when it comes to commentators. We shouldn't stay attached to them and become sycophants. We're supposed to keep growing. And as we grow, we help other people around us grow. And hopefully, some of those commentators can grow as well. In terms of politicians, I don't think that we should trust any politicians at all. There's just so much infiltration in Washington that we just shouldn't give politicians the benefit of the doubt. Sanders' campaign in 2015, he didn't call military aid to Israel wrong. Bernie does not and has not ever supported cutting off arms to Israel, and that has never been his position. So Bernie condemns UN for being anti-Israel. This was in 2017, after 2016 when he ran. Crazy, right? Why Bernie Sanders defending Israel on Al Jazeera is a big deal. Wow, look at that. Just article after article, evidence after evidence. Bernie Sanders, Democrats voted resolution supporting recognition of Jerusalem in Israel's capital. This was condemned by 128 countries in the United Nations vote. This is just in 2017. It's no longer simply good enough for us to be pro-Israel. I'm pro-Israel, but we must treat the Palestinian people as well with the respect and dignity that deserve. Just that first part, though, just is completely unacceptable. He doesn't need to be saying that when they're committing a genocide. For 80 years, they've been doing that. And this is as recent as 2019, when a lot of people were getting hyped up about how Bernie Sanders was coming back into the race after getting cheated in 2016. Bernie Sanders in 2019, again, while I do not support the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctioned movement, we must defend every American's constitutional right to peacefully engage in political activity. It is clear to me that S1 would violate America's First Amendment. So it's good that he was saying that he supports our right to our First Amendment, but he's against BDS though. Boycott and sanctions helped rid South Africa of apartheid. Is Israel next in line? UN charges Israel of war crimes. U.S. Senate unanimously passes resolution to rescind report. Bernie does not oppose. Sanders refuses to firmly take a side. This is in 2011. Neutrality. In 2014, Sanders remained silent on Senate Resolution 498, which was passed unanimously by all senators present for the vote. The resolution supports Israel defending itself from unprovoked attacks. So he's been like this whole time, guys. And there's more. Bernie firing staffers for anti-Netanyahu rant in 2016, the first time he ran for president. Sanders' campaign apologizes for ejecting pro-Palestinian group in 2015. Shut up, you don't have the microphone, Bernie said in 2014. Angrily shouts at his constituents as they challenged his defense of Israel's killing rampage in the Gaza Strip in 2014. It just keeps going, guys. In 2001, Sanders voted yay to H-Res 34, which congratulates Ariel Sharon on his election as prime minister and extends to him the best wishes of the people of the United States. The war criminal Ariel Sharon, well known as the Butcher of Beirut, was responsible for triggering the Al-Aqsa Intifada on September 28, 2000, after his visit to Haram al-Sharif, surrounded by hundreds of Israeli riot police. So we go back even further, showing how Bernie Sanders, and I've talked about this really early on when I first started this channel, I talked about how Bernie Sanders was pretty much a Democrat this whole time. He made it seem like he was an independent by being an independent politician, but he supported the bombing of countries in the Middle East, of let me get the right ones here, the right countries. So in the following week, Bernie, doing quick damage control, ducked responsibility for arresting the Sanders 15 and got himself included in the last minute with a congressional delegation going to Austria to meet representatives of the Russian Duma to bring the Russians in to help broker a settlement in the US-NATO war in Yugoslavia. Before leaving to see the Russians, he voted in favor of the continued bombing of Yugoslavia, a bombing that the Russians had already said would have to stop as a precondition for any settlement. A general town meeting has already been scheduled for the following Monday, so he turned it to a town meeting on Kosovo. So he was like infiltrated this whole time, Bernie Sanders. He supports any intervention that Democrats would support, posing as an independent. And he also was working with Democrats to prevent any third party from forming in Vermont. People are there still like hardcore Elizabeth Warren fans, is what you just saw in that video. So how I felt watching that video of Elizabeth Warren shrinking away from the woman who has lost almost 70 family members in Gaza. Thank you for your approach. Thank you for approaching her and showing us all her reaction or lack thereof. People are done with these politicians. They're done with these progressives. Like, this is it. This position here. Like, if you're supporting genocide, like that's it. That's like you're crossing the line. We're not supporting you. So here are some, Shauna. We've talked a couple times, like through Twitter, as well as some other Tulsi supporters. Like back in the day when I was supporting Tulsi Gabbard in 2019 and 2020, like there was like a good community of Tulsi supporters. Unfortunately, we didn't know that she was a wolf in sheep's clothing. The more informed I got, the more I was able to see this, though, how the whole time she supported drones. When you really think about it, she was still part of the military, right? So she wasn't truly anti-war. She used her words carefully by saying she's anti-regime change war, but she wasn't anti-war. So yeah, here, Tulsi Gabbard back in 2018 saying Israel needs to stop using live ammunition in its response to unarmed protesters in Gaza. It has resulted in over 50 dead and thousands seriously wounded. Shauna, who is a huge supporter for Tulsi up until recently, she's saying, like, what happened here? Like, all these people are just done with Tulsi because of her support for Israel now. Rocky Ballinger, another major supporter of Tulsi Gabbard back in the day, I believe he was also a campaign leader, says this was back when she was pulling the wool over our eyes to dupe us into supporting her. So she was pretty much taking advantage of the Bernie Sanders movement, posing as this anti-war person. Like, there was a lot of opportunities for grifters there to take advantage of people who are starting to wake up and becoming more politically active in 2016 when Bernie Sanders started talking about corporations and how they buy up politicians. Let's not forget how Tulsi Gabbard was the vice president of the DNC. So yeah, she was an establishment through and through. She's part of the World Economic Forum. She gets questioned about it. Jeremy Lafredo, journalist, who writes sometimes for the Gray Zone. I forgot for what other outlets he's written for, but he's an independent journalist. He questioned Tulsi Gabbard on how she has ties to the World Economic Forum, and she was pretty much trying to dodge the question. She didn't really answer things. And people are like done with Hollywood as well. They're done with all these actors. A lot of people would hero worship these actors and actresses, and more people are waking up and they're just done. Like, they're in their desire to end this genocide, their care for human life is much greater than their interest over a show. And I know there's still a couple people out there that are not fully awakened yet, and they're like, oh, I still want my Starbucks. I'm gonna still watch Stranger Things. But I'm seeing a big wave of people that are waking up to this. Reminder, you should be boycotting Stranger Things with that racist and Islamophobic dickhead Noah Schnapp in it. If you don't know what was going on, I thought I had it here, but Noah Schnapp, pretty much, he's an actor for Stranger Things playing Will Byers, and he had a lot of Zionist rhetoric. He was in Israel taking pictures with the Israeli military, and he was posting up pictures and videos on Instagram holding up stickers that said Zionism is sexy, and people are calling him out for that. Same thing with actresses like Amy Schumer. People are starting to call that out. People are starting to wake up on how Hollywood is infiltrated by Zionists, and how there's this weird groupthink there, where people just absorb each other's ideologies to become Zionists, supporting and being complicit in genocide. New poll, Sympathy for Israel plunges among young voters. This is by The Hill. This came out on November 16. Sympathy among U.S. voters for Israel and its war with militant group Hamas plunged among young voters, with more than half now expressing more sympathy for the Palestinians, according to a new Quinnipiac University poll. The nationwide poll released Thursday found 54% of those surveyed said their sympathies lie more with Israelis, while 24% said their sympathies lie more with Palestinians. Overall sympathy for Israelis is down 7 percentage points from the last Quinnipiac University poll taken October 17th, when 61% said they sympathize with Israelis and 13% said the Palestinians. But among voters aged 18 to 34, sympathy for Israelis plunged from last month and shifted to Palestinians. The poll found a slight majority, or 52%, said their sympathies lie more with the Palestinians, while 29% said Israelis. This is a significant reversal from October, when 41% of these voters said Israelis and 26% said Palestinians. The newest poll numbers come out about 5 weeks since Hamas's bloody assault on Israel on October 7th. So as you can tell by that wording, this author, The Hill, the outlet, also are pretty pro-Israel. And people are becoming aware of that. Like, they're questioning news outlets more. Like, I'm talking about normies here. They're starting to question that more. Israel launched a major campaign to eliminate Hamas, a U.S. designated terrorist group, including airstrikes, bombings, and more recently ground attacks in Hamas ruled Gaza. That's because people are becoming aware of how Israel does that like 100-fold. Like there's a huge disequilibrium here. More people are being killed in Gaza, more Palestinians are being killed than Israelis. Like far, far, far more. They're bombing hospitals. They're killing babies. They're killing people in hospitals. And this has been going on for almost 80 years now. It's just becoming more, people are focusing in more on it now that it's being amplified. Pollsters found 46% of voters approve of Israel's response to Hamas to this October 7th attack, while 40% disapproved and 14% did not say. So yeah, guys. And not only that, but people are taking actions. Like when I was at the protest, people obviously there are aware about, there's going to be more people there that are aware of which corporations are supporting Israel. And if there's a corporation that's supporting Israel, then they're complicit in this genocide and we shouldn't be supporting them. So McDonald's, Disney, and Starbucks shares drop as calls for boycott gain worldwide traction. This is according to X. And I'm glad this is happening, but people they're not stopping. They want to take it even further. So this woman here on TikTok is saying that we should continue by protesting Black Friday. There's a lot of support there, as you see, 138.6 thousand likes, several shares, and this is just one person. There's several other people on TikTok with even more likes, shares that are saying this. The word is getting out. So I'm going to share what's being said here. I just want to mention, like she mentioned the Women's March. So I'm assuming that when she went, she is like kind of like a Democrat supporter back then. And there were a lot of people there in DC for the Women's March. It was kind of in response. Most people there were there just like in response to how like Donald Trump, they don't like how he's a misogynist. But it didn't go anywhere after that. With the Palestine protest, though, it seems like people don't want to stop until like Palestine's actually free, and I hope that that continues. But we're seeing here, if she's doing this, I'm assuming from what I'm hearing from other people too, who are used to be Democrats, that they're done because they're all chanting genocide Joe. They're seeing that voting for Democrats doesn't really make a difference. We still get war no matter what. Yeah, it's happening under a Democratic president. The idea that these two parties are different is such an illusion. Like they're both owned by the same people. They just use different strategies depending on who is in office. If it's the Democrats are going to pander to social justice warriors and women and to liberals. When it's a Republican in office, they're going to pander to religious people and obviously, people who are more conservative. All right, start org. Yeah. Organ organizing together, not giving money to these corporations. A criticism that I had with the BLM protests is that people were giving food. There's not, when you just hear that though, people giving food to other people at the protest, that sounds good on the surface. However, they were giving food from McDonald's and from these other corporations that oppress us, that are complicit in genocide around the world. People are, like, as we're seeing, like, they're starting to boycott a lot of those corporations now. I understand that there are some people who can't afford like other foods and sometimes don't have time to cook because they're working 2 or 3 jobs. However, things become easier when we as a community and all together are helping each other out, growing, having community farms, farmers markets. So people are starting to find alternatives away from buying fast foods and supporting these corporations that are oppressing us and being complicit in genocide. So that's good. It's a step forward in from what I'm seeing. What do we have here? I'm trying to look for this one right here. So not only are people talking about Palestine so much online now, on TikTok, educating people, but people are starting to talk about other genocides that are happening in other parts of the world, such as what's happening in the Congo. So let's take a listen here. Oh man, no sound. Are you kidding me? What about the previous video? Could you guys hear that one? Or is it just Chris H? Please let me know in the chat if you guys can hear. Because I'm playing this at like full volume right now. Like it's right in front of my microphone. Let me know in the chat. Can you guys hear? Oh my God, this whole time you weren't able to hear? All right. Dang, man. Sorry about that, guys. I think you guys pretty much got the idea with the last video about how people are starting to protest Black Friday. All right, so I'm going to share here. Hopefully this one works. All right.
Going through a
What about now?
genocide.
Can you hear?
So why isn't the world paying attention to Congo? If you're watching this from a phone, iPad, tablet, or any type of electronic device, I urge you to keep watching this video. DRC is one of the most mineral-rich countries in the entire
It's good
world,
now?
and yet is one of the most economically deprived. Congo is the #1 producer of a natural resource known as coltan, used to make phones, computers, and etc. Of a Rwandan rebel group backed by the Western world called the M.
Can you guys hear the video though? All right, so it sounds like you guys can
23
hear
has
this now.
killed thousands and caused over 1 million to migrate. They are killing, dismembering, and raping thousands, including children. Countries currently benefiting from this: Israel, the United States, Britain, and France. In 2021 alone, Congo produced over 700 metric tons of coltan, and this whole conflict is being used as an opportunity to steal coltan from Congo. Many countries have been criticizing Rwanda, but Britain is holding back on criticizing because of a deal where the UK would send asylum seekers there for processing. This conflict has been going on for years before I, as well as many of you, were born. As long as this conflict is happening, they can easily steal the coltan, and this is how they can keep a hold on Africa and suffocate us for our resources, as well as many other places around the world. The condition of mining coltan is very harsh, and many die due to collapsing mines. Yet no support has been given to guarantee a safer environment for workers. And many, if not most, of these workers are children. Before this genocide, the population was already in poverty, but now more than 70% of the population lives on no more than $2.50 a day. There are many ways that you could help. You could educate yourself and spread awareness, or you could donate to organizations trying to help. Stop turning a blind eye to genocide.
All right, so you guys were able to hear that, right? That was good. Let me know in the chat. But pretty much just exposing how like the US, the UK, they profit off of the cobalt in Congo, and ways that we can help that was not mentioned in the video that I will say is like cobalt, for example. It's used in electric cars, it's used in laptops, phones. A lot of these things, unfortunately, are a necessity for people when it comes to jobs, when it comes to communication with people. Obviously, like what I'm doing right now, communicating with you guys using a PC. So what we could do to help mitigate is to only buy when it's necessary. Like you don't have to buy the like the latest iPhone or the latest Samsung Galaxy. Only buy if it's truly necessary. Like if your phone of 3, 4, 5 years is still good, you don't need a new phone. You don't need to go out there and get the latest iPhone. If your laptop's still good, you don't need to go out there and get a new laptop. No audio from me? Oh, okay. Okay, so you hear me, but you can't hear the video? Can you guys hear me? I'm just waiting to hear back from you all, making sure that you guys can hear me. Standing by, making sure you guys can hear me. But yeah, just standing by. All right. I talked about this video. I mean, this, let me share again the window. I talked about this 3 years ago on my channel. This article that you're seeing right now was on Consortium News as well as on Black Agenda Report. It was during the George Floyd BLM protests. It came out, as you see, June 2020 by Margaret Kimberly, talking about Churchill, Columbus, Leopold, and what they did in the Congo. So she writes, millions of white people glorify mass murderers because their sense of identity and place in society is deeply tied to white supremacy. So this is in response to how people are taking down statues, to people are taking down statues of colonialists. The perpetrators of crimes against humanity are often elevated to positions of respect and admiration. It all depends on who did the killing and who was killed. Now the murderers are being called to account. The new movement in the United States against police and other state violence has inspired this welcome change taking place all over the world. The criminals are being exposed decades and even centuries after their atrocities took place. Here we see a missionary with a Congolese man chopped off his hand because he didn't collect enough resources for these rich white people. Statues of Belgium's King Leopold have been defaced and even removed. Leopold held the Congo as his personal fiefdom, the Congo Free State, where he killed as many as 15 million people who were forced to work on rubber plantations. That's more people that were killed during the Holocaust. In the Holocaust, it was 6 million people. In the Congo, it was 15 million people. One thing I want to point out, yes, the Holocaust for sure needs to be talked about in our education system. My question is, why isn't the Congolese Holocaust talked about in our education system? I didn't learn about this when I was in grade school. It wasn't pushed on me as hard as the Jewish Holocaust that happened during World War II. Why would that be the case? I'm going to get to this later on in the video, but like in more depth, but pretty much the people who pay politicians, corporations, who owns that? It's Zionists. And then that's how they create this. They want to create this sympathy for the people of Israel by pointing to the Holocaust and pointing out, look at the horrible things that happened to these people. That's why they deserve this land here in Israel. And then they use the Bible as an excuse or as evidence that Jewish people were there, as if Palestinians during that time weren't there too, as if Palestinians weren't already living there. The cruelty of murder and mutilation was exposed after a more than 20 year reign of terror. George Washington Williams, a Black American journalist, played a key role in bringing the genocide to public attention. Father stares at the hand and foot of his 5-year-old daughter, which were severed as a punishment for having harvested too little rubber. That's in 1904. Instead of Adolf Hitler being the only European who comes to mind when genocide is mentioned, the name Leopold ought to have the same effect. But Hitler killed Europeans and Leopold killed Africans. The crimes of one are widely known, while the other escapes condemnation because his crimes were erased. King Leopold killed as many as 15 million people who were forced to work on rubber plantations. More images of people with severed hands, severed limbs. The same can be said of Winston Churchill, who has schools named after him, high schools, middle schools all over the country. Not just in this country, but I'm assuming in the UK probably too. History is written by the winners, guys. During World War II, he presided over a famine in colonial India caused by the theft of rice and wheat, which supplied Britain's armies. An estimated 3 million people died, but starvation in Bengal province was not his first opportunity to commit mass murder. After World War I, he advocated gassing Iraqis who rebelled against British rule. I am strongly in favor of using poison gas against uncivilized tribes. He had already ordered chemical weapons attacks against the Russian Bolsheviks in 1918. Now Churchill's statues in London's Parliament Square is covered in a large box to protect it from protesters. A group scrawled graffiti which correctly labeled as a racist the man who said that his Indian victims breed like rabbits. The taboos are falling just like the statues that honored slave traders and Indian killers in this country. Robert E. Lee's monument in Richmond, Virginia, is now covered in graffiti and a likeness of George Floyd, whose murder at the hands of police motivated people to denounce the killers whose crimes are covered up. Too many historians choose to affirm corrupt systems rather than tell the truth, but the people are ignoring entities from all the elites and are taking matters into their own hands. Christopher Columbus is among those being exposed. His voyages on behalf of the Spanish crown were followed by other European invasions, which brought disease and bloody conquest against indigenous populations from the tip of South America all the way to Alaska. This genocide was the precursor to the transatlantic slave trade, which brought Africans to suffer as chattel throughout North and South America. So we're seeing history repeat itself with what's happening in Palestine, with the news, all these news organizations, which are owned by Zionists, right? They're trying to whitewash what's happening. They're trying to have people feel more sympathy for Israelis. And no sympathy, and they're not presenting any sympathy for Palestinians, which are being brutally annihilated. And what's going on now? We're seeing that a lot of these normies are getting educated through TikTok. Prior to that, people were getting educated on YouTube, but that got infiltrated and people got veered towards other directions with people who have fake solutions, like people telling people to support these dead-end parties like MPP, Movement for a People's Party. There were some people, unfortunately, that were still thought that voting for Democrats was going to help or supporting progressives. But these people are, what's the word for it? It is limited hangouts. These people are limited hangouts, right? They tell you the truth about some things, but then veer you towards a fake solution. Or they support other bad things. Like AOC and the Squad, obviously they support some acts of war, but not others. Same thing with the Republicans, with Marjorie Taylor Greene, which a lot of people were praising during the Rage Against the War Machine event that happened. Just because she had criticisms on the US's support for Ukraine, all of a sudden people are like, oh, she's anti-war. You can't criticize her because she is against what the US is supporting with Ukraine. Only for her to be spewing Zionist rhetoric now. And I don't see those people calling out Marjorie Taylor Greene now. And I don't see those people when they pull up laundry lists of bad things that AOC and the Squad do, which rightfully they should call out. And this is what the Flame of Liberation and Glory Jones were talking about earlier. Yeah, these people need to be exposed. When they're trying to infiltrate movements, protests, we should be calling them out. Like when AOC and Cori Bush, like when they were at the march, AOC wasn't there. Cori Bush tried to infiltrate the March for Medicare for All event that was happening in DC. And people were calling her out. And also with the eviction protests that were happening in 2021, when I was showing how AOC and Cori Bush were trying to gaslight people about how the situation was solved. They are there to pretty much as crowd control, to make people think that there's people in Congress helping out. That's what Marjorie Taylor Greene was doing. And that's what even some independent politicians do. like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. now. Prior to being independent, he was a Democrat. Bernie Sanders as well. Like, you guys get what I'm saying? They're limited hangouts. But like I was saying, people are becoming more educated. People are like, this is it. Like, if you are a Zionist, I'm not supporting you. I'm not voting for you. And like the FCC, these politicians that are owned by these corporations, they are in fear of how people are becoming more aware. And so this is what's going on here. So I'm going to share this video, and then I'm going to elaborate on what's being said here.
All internet services and infrastructure.
Let me refresh so it can start from the beginning.
Speed. Folks, while everybody's focused on what's happening in Israel and Gaza, I'm going to bring your attention to a major story happening this week that nobody seems to be covering. The Biden administration is literally steps away from regulating all internet service providers and taking over all internet infrastructure across the United States.
Brendan Carr is calling the Biden administration's digital equality plan for all internet services and infrastructure an awful power grab. He said President Biden's plan hands the administrative state effective control of all internet services and infrastructure in the country. Carr went on to say the Biden administration's plan empowers the FCC to regulate every aspect of the internet sector for the first time ever.
So let's verify this for ourselves right off the Federal Communication Commission website, right off the government's website. And this is astounding because this is the head of the FCC himself right there. And Carr opposes Biden's plan. As always, this is in my sources, so you can check it out and read it for yourself. President Biden's plan sweeps entire industries within the FCC's jurisdiction for the first time in the agency's 90-year history. President Biden's plan allows the FCC to impose unfunded build mandates on ISPs and unlimited monetary fines on every covered entity. The final vote for this is happening pretty much immediately. Next Wednesday, November 15th, the FCC is having their final vote. And if it wasn't for the Commissioner Brendan Carr, we probably never would have heard about it. And I bet they didn't talk about this on your 5 o'clock news. Well,
Right. Yeah, so then what happened? Because Wednesday, November 15th already passed. So what happened with that? The FCC adopts rules to eliminate digital discrimination for communities with poor internet access. So has enacted new rules intended to eliminate discrimination and access to internet services, a move which regulators are calling the first major U.S. digital civil rights policy. But as like what was being discussed, like they're trying to monitor what we look at. They're trying to censor what we see like on TikTok. Let me see what else is being said. Senator Cruz reacts to FCC's vote to finalize digital equity plan. It's pretty much like a Trojan horse. And like we're seeing here, celebrities like Sacha Baron Cohen accuses TikTok, let me move this out the way, of creating the biggest anti-Semitic movement since the Nazis. He's calling for more censorship on TikTok, as if he didn't make a career out of making fun of Muslim people with Borat, by making fun of Kazakhstan, but with his movie The Dictator. But he's getting called out for this on Twitter. Like I was saying, like just like with these Zionist actors like Noah Schnapp and Amy Schumer, like this is crossing the line. If you support genocide, like we're gonna call your ass out. Let's see if there's something here that's worth pointing out. Look, TikTok users and celebrities met virtually on Wednesday. Other users on TikTok were sharing Osama bin Laden's letter to America. That's another thing. A lot of normies were surprised at what Osama bin Laden was talking about in his letter. talking about America's Zionism and their support for Israel, and Osama bin Laden is pretty much saying, like, I see that as a threat. You guys supporting Israel, who, like, this country's there in the Middle East to pretty much be a country where they help the US and the UK have access to these resources and go to war with the surrounding countries there in the Middle East. Where did it go? In which he claimed he orchestrated the deadly attacks on the World Trade Center that killed nearly 3,000 Americans because the US attacked us in Palestine. The terror leader also called the creation of Israel a crime which must be erased, and went on to assert that in the US, Jews control your policies, media, and economy. This isn't mean, like, because people freak out about this. Because people were freaking out when Kanye West was talking about this. Talking about how there's Jews that own pretty much all corporation. They have control over things that are being discussed in the news. Since they own it, they're like, oh, this is like the same rhetoric that Hitler was using when he was talking about how Jewish people own the banks and having people be fearful of Jews. This isn't supposed to be about all Jewish people. There's Jewish people that are at these Free Palestine protests. There are rabbis who support the freeing of Palestine, who are against the Israel apartheid state. It's not talking about all Jewish people. It's talking about the Zionists who own all these corporations. The terror leader, okay. Speaking of the videos of Gen Z users promoting the letter, one person at the meeting Wednesday claimed it had become the talk of the app and added, in regards to trending topics right now as we speak, this trend needs to end. This app needs to ban this letter. A TikTok spokesperson has since said that content promoting this letter clearly violates our rules on supporting any form of terrorism, and added that the company was proactively and aggressively removing this content and investigating how it got onto our platform. It got onto the platform because it was published on The Guardian, I believe it was originally. I think their intention was to say, oh, look, like, terrorists supported Palestine. They didn't like Israel, but it backfired. Instead, people started to understand why there were terrorists who hated Israel because of what Israel has done to a lot of Arabs in that region. And they took it down. But people took screenshots of the letter and they republished it in other sites. And now people are discussing that on TikTok. But I'm seeing people on TikTok and in other places, they're starting to become more aware about the dangers of censorship now because of this. There were other people, like, prior to everything that's going on right now in Palestine, who were like pro censorship about some things. I hope they're starting to realize now about how, like, any kind of censorship about what's going on in the world, like, is not good. Like, we should be aware of why these things happen, about what's going on. Like, we needed to understand the psychology of Osama bin Laden, about why he wanted to attack America. And when you read the letter, you can understand why he did it. It doesn't mean that I support, like, the violence. And I don't think that's what the majority of these people who are talking about the letter on TikTok support. They're not supporting the violence. Instead, they're understanding why they have this hatred, why they were fearful of the US and Israel. What's going on, Glory and ICU? What's up? Musk just made it policy that you can't say decolonization from the river to the sea on X, on your account. and you will be suspended. Yeah, I mean, the people thought that Elon Musk was a solution, and I still saw people even up until recently saying like, can you imagine all the censorship that would be happening, like prior to Elon Musk, if the people who were in charge of Twitter before Elon Musk were still in charge, how much censorship we'll see? Yeah, we would have seen censorship for sure, but Elon Musk, as we're seeing, like he's shadow banning people still. He's saying now, from what I'm hearing from ICU here, you can't say decolonization and from the river to the sea, because they're going to say that that's inciting violence, probably. Glory Jones, well, and bin Laden is a U.S. asset. Yeah, that part needs to be mentioned for sure, right? Who helped to create bin Laden? It was the U.S. It was the intelligence agencies of the U.S. And there is a fair amount of astroturfing and shady shit going into getting people reading bin Laden as opposed to actual revolutionaries. Well said. Real quick, Glory and Prop, let me know if you want to get in this live stream, because I do want to talk about the vindication that we have on Rage Against the War Machine. And I am going to play some clips about that discussion Glory had with Flame of Liberation. So real quick, I'm going to share this out to some people who might want to hop on this stream. Yeah, I highly recommend you guys check out this video right here by Glory Jones, featuring on the Flame of Liberation's channel. So we can watch a little bit of that together.
Of Israel, who attack anyone who mildly criticizes Israel's genocidal assault against Gaza. And these individuals were just shortly before October 7th touted by these left-right alliance grifters as supposed allies with regard to the situation in Ukraine and possibly more broadly. So I think this whole situation has really destroyed this whole left-right alliance grift that we saw really come about, or come to a head, I guess you could say, with the Rage Against the War Machine publicity stunt that happened earlier. So today we have a guest, an excellent guest to discuss this, Glory Jones, who has also been exposing this whole situation with the left-right alliance grift, who has been active in her area in Florida, involved with the situation with Palestine organizing. Welcome. Please introduce yourself to the audience and tell people where they could find you and your work on social media.
Hi, I'm Glory Jones. I'm an independent artist and I research a bunch of stuff. And I also co-host the Slow News Day show, which you can find on Rockfin. And I also appear on many other shows like this one, and also our friend Franco over at Frank Analysis. But as to where you can find me on the ground and around, particularly between Miami-Dade and Broward County. But you can also find me on Twitter, mainly. If you search Glory Jones, I'll come up with a hashtag Free Assange next to it. And that's me. I'm shadow banned to hell right now, but...
One second.
Yeah, so please, if you haven't already, go follow her on all of those on Twitter, and with the situation with
marches like you've seen in places like London or New York or Los Angeles or DC. Like here, so it's not really
a vindication.
it's had with all of its puppets in Latin America. And of course, there's a space missing there for Cuba. But yeah, right outside that monument.
Very active here. And I think that's throughout most of the country, at least, in the big cities. There's things that really have heated up to an extent that we haven't seen as far as in Palestine organizing. I don't think it's ever been this active. And it's interesting you mentioned, in Florida with DeSantis, with this far right administration,
some of this colonial madness that's in the world.
Gabbard and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And the funny thing is, shortly before indicated,
where they're talking about
work with Zionists, work with all kinds of horrendous people we're trying to promote and whitewash and say, oh, we should work with them. We need to work with them.
So they're talking about here the Rage Against the War Machine, and how there were people saying that we need to work with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tulsi Gabbard. We need to work with RFK Jr. And their support for Israel was already known prior to this. But people were like, oh, but here they're supporting Ukraine. I mean, they're supporting, they're against the war in Ukraine. They're against US's support for Ukraine. So we should have them, we should bring them in as speakers. So yeah. And at the end of the day, I will say that Rage Against the War Machine event only had people from the independent media bubble. Like, compare that to the pro-Palestine, free Palestine protests that are happening all around the world. You think most of those people are listening to like Jimmy Dore or some of these other independent media voices or alt media voices? A lot of these people are normies, and they get their sources, their information from so many other places, right? They're not attached to these people. And that's what I want a lot of you guys to realize. Don't attach yourself to these commentators so much. You start to you pretty much just morph all your opinions that you have about the world. Like, you adopt all of their positions as your own positions. Like, that's what I'm seeing, like this sycophantic behavior that a lot of followers of Jimmy Dore are like. And some of the other channels that repeat the stuff that Jimmy Dore says, or finally think it's okay to talk about things because Jimmy Dore started talking about it. Like, people started being against the COVID censorship when Jimmy Dore started talking about it more. People started talking about the Great Reset more when Jimmy Dore and Max Blumenthal started talking about it. And I can get more into that in a bit here as we hear more from Glory and Flame of Liberation.
We need to work with everyone we can to stop World War III and the threat of thermonuclear war. That's their favorite thing to say, is that nothing matters except for thermonuclear war. So that means that we'll work with Zionists, work with all kinds of horrendous people because of the threat of thermonuclear war, because of the situation in Ukraine. And these two particular individuals that have come out and are just absolutely vicious in their their attacks on people, Tulsi Gabbard and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And the funny thing is, shortly before October 7th, some of these right-left alliance grifters who were condemning anyone who had issues with the Rage Against the War Machine, just shortly before October 7th, they were praising and defending and promoting Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tulsi Gabbard. And most of them are pretty silent now. They don't have much to say. I'm curious, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah. Well, and especially like with Marjorie Taylor Greene, because I forget if she was actually a speaker at the rally, but I do know she was heavily promoted by a lot of the speakers there. When she had attended an anti-Russia Ukraine war demonstration that Code Pink was holding, the organizers, after pictures of her with the Code Pink protesters started circulating on social media, some Code organizers basically came out and said, hey, listen, we let her stand with us, but we're pretty sure she did this in an opportunistic fashion, which is true. Like, I don't know why pointing that out is exactly a taboo thing, because it's very clear that the anti-intervention position that Marjorie Taylor Greene took on Russia and Ukraine was something motivated mainly by opportunism, and also by the fact that she wanted to take those resources and then spend it on the bigger war with China, or at the southern border, securitizing and militarizing the shit out of the southern border to prevent fentanyl from crossing the border, or prevent terrorist savages from crossing the border, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty clear. I'd hope it would be pretty clear that that's where motivations for standing against the Russia-Ukraine war lied. And like her putting forth a bill to block funding for Ukraine isn't an inherently bad thing. But again, this is a congressperson. They're not actually there to serve the people. They're there to be PR for corporations and empire, which actually pull the strings in this country. So you have to be honest and recognize that she's not doing it out of, the right intentions. And then, so that's my thing on Marjorie Taylor Greene. And obviously it's being true by the fact that she's just a virulent Zionist right now, and, promoting among with other, a lot of other anti-establishment commentators and politicians promoting this idea that there's like Hamas terror cells in Mexico that can't wait to cross the southern border, or that there's jihadists right now in the United States that can't wait for Palestine to win, that can't wait for Hamas, or sorry, as they say it, Hamas, to win the war. So that way they can complete their jihad or whatever it is. And it's just the most, stupid, repulsive nonsense ever that they're pushing against immigrants, especially Muslim and Arab immigrants. But yeah, I digress. That's what Marjorie Taylor Greene is promoting right now. And then you have Tulsi Gabbard.
1 second, real quick. So they were just talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Saul Good says Marjorie Taylor Greene really let me down. Chris A says Pasta Roasted code pink for distancing themselves from Marjorie Taylor Greene. And it wasn't just him. It was Max Blumenthal also. Max, they were like, they came out and said, we don't support, like Code Pink was like, we don't support Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's nothing wrong with saying that, because she's a Zionist. What she just demonstrated is that she's an opportunist. She's a limited hangout. Just like when the Squad and AOC, when they claim they support Medicare for all, and when they say that they're against the evictions and we're at the eviction moratorium protests, it's limited hangout behavior. Everybody in Congress who's there is allowed to be there because they are all controlled opposition. There will be some of them that will appear like rebels sometimes, like Rashida Tlaib and AOC right now, who are promoting some milquetoast propositions about their stance on Palestine. But then you look at all their other records, like the rest of the record. Like, they have supported bombing in other situations. They take a rotation. Which Squad member is going to support bombing this country now? They're at the end of the day, they're pro-capitalists. Everybody in the Squad, everybody in Congress, at the end of the day. If someone was truly a threat, they wouldn't be allowed in Congress. If someone was truly a threat, they'd just be there to expose this, like how everybody in Congress is pretty much control opposition. But nobody's doing that because everybody there is control opposition. But yeah, it was like Max Blumenthal and all that. If it were Like it's hypocritical, and Flame of Liberation and Glory Jones also point this out. If it was AOC or Marjorie Taylor Greene trying to infiltrate these protests, they would be calling them out on how they're inconsistent and they're pro-war in some other instances. And they didn't do that for Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Who I have a history with because I used to steer for her campaign. And
Oh wow, you were part of her campaign.
Yeah, I used to
Wow, I
volunteer
didn't
for
know
her
that.
campaign. Yeah, in 2019 when she was actually LARPing as like, you know, someone who's anti-war, pro-environment. And it oh my God. And she was back in 2019, freaking puppy dog-eyed
had action to
activist who
show
still
that
thought that, you know, we
made some
could
people think
vote our way out of it. Not that we could vote our way out of it, but that
she
some
was like
politicians would help us
rebelling
and
against
all
the
that
system.
nonsense. And
Well, at that
yeah.
time, Bernie Sanders was big, and she was sort of attaching herself to Bernie Sanders in the early stages of that. So I think, yeah, me too. And I think a lot of people, even if we didn't like Bernie and we knew he was an imperialist and a Zionist and stuff, there was the thought, okay, maybe his movement, something good could come out of it. But yeah, please continue.
No, and that's what I thought with Tulsi too, because she had, while she was in Congress, she had introduced the Off Fossil Fuels Act and the Terrorist Act. And I looked at those and I was like, okay, so she's kind of, you know, backing up some of her talk here. I think I can support her. So, you know, I volunteered for her and all that good stuff. And then she dropped out and I was like, okay, fuck this. I'm done with the fucking presidential election. And then, you know, she more and more and more, she's making this like, very right-wing hyper-partisan grift turn that, and now she's just outright sounding like George Bush, and it's just like, Jesus fucking Christ, I'm so glad I don't support you anymore. But yeah, because she's really, again, she's promoting that and again that she said the past couple years really about the number one threat to all of humanity on earth being Islamism and the violent Islamist ideology. And essentially like, oh, you can't support Palestine because part of the resistance has Islamist terrorists. I joined the army to fight after 9/11, even though like she clearly knows, again, that there was a lot of foul play on the part of the United States with regards to 9/11. And she clearly knows that the United States military, along with the CIA, along with various corporations around the world, really, they sponsor actual terrorism that happens in the global South. And she knows all of this, and she's connected to people that know all of this. And yet she's going out and spouting this nonsense about stopping Hamas and yada, yada, yada. And like, I don't even want to call it disappointing just because I've completely given up on her years ago, but it's just incredibly, I don't know, it's annoying. It's annoying to see. And it really is disheartening in a sense to see just how many people are still willing to buy into that nonsense regarding jihadism in the United States and in the EU, just because it really promotes a repulsive and disgusting narrative against immigrants, refugees, and anybody who's not white. And it also is very clearly being used to push a lot of ulterior agendas that aim to securitize and militarize society and usher in, you know, a lot of digital surveillance measures such as digital IDs, which can easily be connected to an outlet like Palantir, for instance, which is again backed by two Alex Karp and Peter Thiel, two virulent Zionists again. So that's just, you know, an example of the way that it's being used, and it's very frustrating to see this being by a lot of figures that are hailed as sort of anti-establishment.
Yeah, and I find it astounding that so many. Well, it's not even that it's so many, but it's very prominent YouTubers like Jimmy Dore, for example. Fall for this. It's like Jimmy Dore has been doing this for how long? And Tulsi Gabbard, even at the time of the rage against the war machine, even before, as I said, even before October 7th and her most recent Zionist comments, she made clear that she was a Zionist. She was an active duty military personnel person
in the
in
PSYOPs
Africa.
division.
In the PSYOPs division,
all things,
which is exactly what she is. If you think about it, she's basically a PSYOP. Her whole political stances, and she put out, like, I don't know if it was a TikTok video or some stupid video on social media talking about how she's so proud of her service in Africa. She doesn't say where specifically because she has to protect the security, blah, blah, blah.
Oh yeah, I know which video you're talking about too, because she literally opened it being like, sorry, I haven't posted in a while, guys. I was overseas in Africa fighting terrorists.
Protecting
and I was
your
like,
freedom.
Whoa, wait,
we were gonna play that.
wait, what? Just casually dropping that you're doing an imperialism while you're on your little Twitter hiatus. Like, okay, thanks.
Aloha, everyone. You haven't heard much from me lately. I've been gone for the last 4 months, serving on an active duty tour and deployment to Africa as a civil affairs officer. I was supporting a special forces mission to go after Al-Qaeda affiliated jihadists. Now, every single day, it was truly my honor to work with incredible patriots. It is our men and women in uniform who selflessly and quietly defend the safety, security, and freedom of our country every day.
Yeah. And the response of so many of these people who are duped by this left-right alliance BS, their response, it's amazing. No exaggeration. Well, maybe slight exaggeration, but so many of them, I've seen them, when you bring this up, they're like, what? Oh, I mean, it's Africa. Who cares? It's Al-Qaeda. Come on. Who cares? You know? It's like, that's been their response.
Like Al-Shabaab is actually a problem in Somalia, and people love us for helping fight it.
Yeah, these are the same people who are telling us, who are rightly 1 minute pointing out how the U.S. supported Al-Qaeda, the next minute, and pointing out how U.S. foreign policy is always based on lies. It's always imperialist, and they use these various talking points for propaganda to justify imperialism. All of a sudden, it's like, oh no, the U.S. is really fighting Al-Qaeda there, and it's really a just cause. It's like, how stupid are these people? Just because Tulsi Gabbard says it, they just eat the whole thing up and believe the whole thing. So even before this whole thing, we knew, even at the time of the rage against the war machine, we knew that Tulsi Gabbard was a fraud and an imperialist and a Zionist. But now she's talking about how the Democratic Party is beholden to jihadists. She's basically implying that Joe Biden is a jihadist and a Hamas supporter. In absolute, like, complete insanity. And I don't understand how these people, who otherwise they claim to oppose what Israel's doing, they claim to be against Zionism, somehow they fell for this, and I don't know if they've started to criticize Tulsi Gabbard, but it's amazing. There needs to be some kind of reckoning for this kind of mistake. And
I think, for what it's worth, amongst like the Tulsi supporters, obviously I don't talk with Tulsi supporters anymore, but from what I've seen, there's a decent chunk of Tulsi supporters who supported her back in 2019 because of what we thought she stood for. A decent chunk of those supporters are now calling her out, being like, hey, what the fuck are you saying? No better. This makes no sense. But yeah, there's still a decent chunk of people who buy the shit.
Yeah, well, that's good that actual, like, regular people, let's say, that were involved in the campaign are calling her out on that, because, I mean, it's so obvious that it's really beyond. Before, it was pretty obvious. Now it's just beyond anything. But I think, honestly, a lot of these, as I mentioned, YouTubers and people who make a living off of this and who really used Rage Against the War Machine as a publicity stunt for them to get more money in reality, they kind of know what's going on, and they don't really care. I mean, some of them maybe are stupid, but a lot of them, I mean, they would have to be extremely stupid to not see what's going on. I think it's just they realize that it's a good grift for them.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah, real quick. Like it was pointing out, like a good grip for them. There's no consistency with a lot of the people who were promoting the Rage Against the War Machine event, because they were saying like this is it, right? Like World War III might start. Like I don't want thermonuclear war to start, and that's why we need to get together with as many people as we can. The thing is, they were bringing in speakers who could help in enable the thermonuclear war because they're pro-war when it comes to Israel, like their stance on Israel, because they support Israel, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tulsi Gabbard. Or they supported Russia's actions. They chose a side against the US and their support for the Ukraine, but they were in support of Russia's actions. When the true anti-war stance, as I was saying back when I was criticizing this event, the true anti-war stance is to be against all ceasefire. All ceasefire should end altogether, both on Russia's side and on the Ukraine side, US-Ukraine side. The difference with what's going on in Israel and Palestine is that it's the Palestinian people that are defending themselves against Israel. In the case of Russia and Ukraine, it's the Russian government who is using the Wagner Group also versus the Ukraine government and NATO. So it's just it's just like governments versus other governments here. With the Russia-Ukraine situation, it's different with Israel and Palestine. Right? It's different. It would be different if it was like the Russian people that are in Ukraine. It was just them who were defending themselves against Ukraine and NATO. And Russia would be calling for a ceasefire for them to stop. Not Russia going in, saying that they're just defending their borders when they continue to go west. And where were they prior to what happened in February 2022? Because Ukraine's attacks on Donetsk was going on for several years already, had been going on for several years already. Let's not also forget how Russia supports Israel or makes business deals with Israel. They'll put out some rhetoric about how they're against the US and all that. But at the end of the day, I personally don't trust capitalist governments. They have their own personal interests. I stand with the people, not governments. But yeah, I wanted to show you guys this. Because me and other people like Flame of Liberation, Glory, Propaganda, and several others had been showing consistency. Others who criticize the Rage Against the War Machine event have been consistent because we are promoting other anti-war events. Like I was promoting the one that happened in DC and others that are happening in other parts of the country. I supported the Rage Against the War Machine events that were happening in other parts of the country outside of DC, rather than just traveling to DC to protest. I was saying other people should organize locally and not have it be this like big, trying to make it this big show of like a meet and greet of your favorite independent commentator. And that's how they were treating it, because they weren't promoting this right here. They were not promoting Code Pink, how they were hosting their rally. I'm trying to make this full screen, but I guess that's it. All right. So I said, let's go back down. All the people who are getting mad at critics of Rage Against the War Machine, hope you guys are consistent and promote that this event, what Code Pink was hosting, their anti-war event. Hope you guys are consistent and promote this just as much as you were raving about Rage Against the War Machine. It shouldn't matter if you disagree with Code Pink sometimes, right? Because they were the people who were supporting the Rage Against the War Machine. They were saying, "Oh, it shouldn't matter that you don't agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene on some issues. It shouldn't matter that you don't agree with Tulsi Gabbard on some issues, because they're supporting this event." But then, where were those people when this event happened? The urgency of pursuing peace in Ukraine that happened on October 3rd. Jimmy Dore, complete silence. Max Blumenthal, complete silence. I thought it didn't matter if you disagreed with these people, though. I thought it didn't matter if you disagreed with Cornel West or Medea Benjamin or Claudia de la Cruz. It shouldn't matter, right? But they didn't promote it because they're hypocrites. That wasn't the only time. I was still promoting Julian Assange events that were happening. I said here, oh, it wasn't this one, my bad. I tagged Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy, I hope you get the word out about this event, despite however Answer Coalition may have came at you. You said we should all get together to stop nuclear war, right? Despite disagreements, right? If you get the word out, I know many of your fans will follow. He didn't promote it. He was silent about it. It was just a few weeks after the Rage Against the War Machine event, and they didn't talk about that anti-war protest that happened in March 2023. But yeah, Angela McGardle saying that she supported the event, but I mean, I didn't see her promote it as much. She just said that she supports it, but that's just her. And there's like other libertarians that are like pro-Israel. Let me see. I'm not sure how to show the rest of the screenshot, but I guess that's all we can see for now. And then these people showed no accountability about how they were wrong about the Wagner Group, because that was an issue that I was critical about how Russia was using the Wagner Group. And then what happened 4 months ago? The Wagner Group, a military group of 50,000 mercenaries and former allies of Putin, has taken up arms against the Russian president. Military vehicles surround the center of Moscow, with planes and tanks filling the streets. There is talk of a coup against Putin. And then there's like Vanessa Beeley, Fiorella, they all spun it as like, oh, like this is still like Putin's victory at the end of the day. Even though I was critical, like why would he work with them in the first place with what they do in places like Africa? So she was like, the same Wagner Group fighting alongside Syrian Arab army to defeat US-UK terrorism. Russia also deployed Chechens in Syria. Why? Because they are Muslim and could act as reconciliation negotiators and reassure civilians after liberation of Syrian territory. FM armed gangs contacts. And I said my text was about the Wagner Group specifically. And I was talking about how the same Wagner Group that like commits atrocities in Africa. Like they're a private corporation of mercenaries. And then we saw what happened. I said, just like I questioned NATO and the Azov Battalion's involvement with Ukraine, many journalists and commentators in the alt media space would defend Putin's choice in hiring this group in the war with Ukraine. That's why we shouldn't like pick sides. And when it comes to like governments having war against each other, and like at the end of the day, it's two capitalist countries fighting against each other, and it's not like a small vulnerable country like if it were like Honduras or Nicaragua or another small country that gets invaded by the US. Like, that's a different situation. Instead, we have Russia, a big powerhouse, interested in some resources there that are in Ukraine, versus the US, that powerhouse of NATO, interested in the same resources in Ukraine. It's a completely different situation from the people of Palestine who defend themselves, or the people of Nicaragua or Honduras to defend themselves. Okay, so let's continue here with this discussion between Glory and Flame of Liberation.
That's why very few of the YouTube insert ecosystem that's connected to Rage Against the War Machine was willing to call out Jimmy Dore for the dog shit interview he had with RFK, where
that's
he
another
sat
one,
there. Yeah, where he sat there and let RFK spew the most vile Zionist propaganda unchallenged, and then afterwards tried to weasel his way out of it by saying, "Oh, well, I showed him one graphic from the UN, and I got him to agree to a debate with Max Blumenthal." When it's like, bro, you seriously thought that he was actually going to debate Max Blumenthal? No, what's happening is you're doing fucking damage control, and your simps love you to call you out on it. So, yeah, that's another thing I wanted to bring up, because that was another ass showing moment there.
Yeah, that's another good point. I think it brings me to this other point that I wanted to raise. These are the same people who are they're relentless when it comes to criticizing AOC and the squad, and rightly so. I mean, the squad does need to be called out for all their support for warmongering, but there's a complete double standard. It's like when it comes to the squad, AOC, it's like they're complete pure evil. They know exactly what they're doing, and it's deliberate. But then with Tulsi Gabbard or RFK, oh, he doesn't know. Let's just set up this debate and we'll sort it all out. It's not deliberate. He's well intentioned. This is, we're just gonna explain it to him and he'll understand. No, this is a deliberate thing, and it's he's a politician, and it's not an issue of oh, let's just convince him. There's a reason why he takes these positions. So, and I think so that brings me to another point I wanted to make. So with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who a lot of these people have been whitewashing, these Rage Against the War Machine people have been whitewashing and supporting and promoting, she is even worse than the squad when it comes to the current situation in Palestine. Now, the squad is not good, honestly. They are not sufficient at all, but they're making very mild criticisms of Israel. And according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's calling the squad Hamas supporters, terrorism supporters, anti-Semitic. So are all these Rage Against the War Machine people going to now call for an alliance with the squad because the squad is like slightly better on the issue of Palestine? I don't think they are. I'm not advocating for them to do that, but according to their logic, they would be calling for an alliance with the squad right now when it comes to the issue of Palestine, but they're not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone where I wouldn't want an alliance with any politician unless if it's, unless if it's solely using them as a means. And yes, I know that does take away some of their autonomy. But let's be real, if you're going into the United States Congress, you're already giving that up to begin with. So So yeah, I'm not someone to advocate for an alliance with any politician to begin with, or any member of corporate media, like say Tucker Carlson or Piers Morgan, for instance.
Oh yeah.
You know, for with those kinds of figures, they're more so platforms than anything else, and you know, a means to help further your cause. So I just don't understand why. I mean, I do understand, but you know, rhetorically, it's a question I raise, that people who claim to be anti-establishment, they don't just you know, unilaterally sort of ignore. I don't want to say ignore, but no, but have full knowledge and be cognizant of what the actual intentions of politicians are. That, you know, like if the squad does something supportive of their cause, it's, oh, they're leeches, they're grifters, they're just doing this for PR, which is again 100% right. But when Marjorie Taylor Greene does the same thing, is, oh, how dare you call her an opportunist? Are you trying to sabotage our alliance that's going to stop war? And it's
You must want thermonuclear war, World War III, if
I
you
know,
criticize
and it's
her.
like, listen, like, I'm not a big fan of the idea of nuclear war either, but like, it's essentially, the threat of it is essentially getting watered down a lot, to the point where it's becoming less of, you know, a significant threat should great powers clash, and more so of just emotional blackmail to use against people to, you know, abandon their principles. Like, oh, you don't want to ally, you don't want to kiss this Zionist ass, well, I guess you must want nuclear war.
You know
Or
what it
it's
is?
like,
It's exactly what the Democrats do, isn't it? It's like when the election time comes, it's like, what, you're not going to
yeah,
vote for the Democrat? You must want there to be fascism. You don't care if fascism is going to be, it's the exact same logic.
yeah. And it's like, yes, I do. Again, I'm not even saying that you can't work with people. I'm just saying you need to call them out and be cognizant of what they are, and be aware of the fact that they have ulterior motives and an agenda of their own. And unless if you actively call that, or, you know, work to change their mind, then you're not gonna advance your cause in a really substantive way. All that's gonna really happen is, you know, you might get some more eyes on it, but then for what? You're gonna get people that still think that it's okay to call every brown person a jihadist, and now push for giving more weapons to Israel, the Zionist occupation. Sorry, like, I'm sorry, but you have to be willing to actually confront people, and, you know, if you change them, then you have to at least make it socially and financially untenable to maintain their Zionism, because otherwise, like, otherwise this shit's just going to continue, because it's 2023, and I'm glad to see that Zionism is finally starting to crumble, but like, to go faster. This shit can't go on. It really, like, I'm really sick and tired, and I'm sure there are way more other people in this world that are even more sick and tired of, you know, the continued oppression and genocide of Palestinian people than I am, which is so intimately connected to colonization and terrible subjugation that's happening around the world.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. And I think it's a question of, okay, if you're going to have a pragmatic alliance with someone, the question is, are you using them or are they using you? And I think with the Rage Against the War Machine
That's
thing,
the biggest thing.
these supposed leftists involved with it were basically used by the people on the right. And if you just uncritically support these people, you're basically just a rubber stamp. All you are is basically, oh, look, I'm a leftist, but I'm not like those other leftists. I'm a leftist, and it's basically like, so when Fox News has some leftist on to, say, criticize the Democrats, and I'm not saying like not to go on Fox News, it's a great platform, but the reason why they're doing that is because they want to give credence to their own argument. It's like, look, even these leftists are against what they're saying. You know, they're using you to justify their own message. They're not bringing you on just because they're trying to have a balanced opinion, or they're trying to bring on, you know, all sorts of different voices. They're using you basically to prop themselves up to say, oh, look, even this leftist agrees with me.
And that's exactly what people like Tucker Carlson would do. Like, he'd mainly use leftists when he would bring them on. And I'm not saying people shouldn't have gone on his show. They should go on Fox News, but also expose Fox News, also expose Republicans, so that their audiences can wake up. Not just like going after Democrats and that's it. Right? You gotta call out all these people. Call out how Fox News has people on and has hosts that have hosts who do support certain wars. Right? Why doesn't that get called out in Fox News? And that's what they use the limited time that they have the leftists on to just say certain things to show like, oh yeah, look at how crazy the Democrats are. Even leftists, some leftists see how crazy the Democrats are. And then they just start talking about like, oh yeah, like BLM, like that's a bad thing. Well, when they bring up their other rhetoric that's just like against organizing, like protests, against the resistance against capitalism.
And I think if you are to have an alliance with some politician, I think a key thing to this would be you have to extract concessions out of them. And that's not what they did during the Rage Against the War Machine. They just
kissed their ass. That's like even worse than not getting any concessions. It was like a massive ass kissing fest. Being
exactly.
Like, oh my God, I disagree with you, but I'm so happy that you're here with us today. That is so good of you to come together with us to oppose a war. You are on the right side of history, and I love you for it. And then, 8 months later, they're screaming on about everybody that says from the river to the sea is a jihadist that wants to genocide all Jewish people.
Yeah, that's exactly. And for more, on Marjorie Taylor Greene.
All right, so I'm trying to type up I'd love to American Autopsy, but my chat isn't letting me type that out. But yeah, American Autopsy, I'd love to go on your show. I'll be back on your show because I have been there before. I'd love to go back on.
What did she do? She called for Rashida Tlaib to be censured by the House of Representatives. And that's what happened. The House of Representatives censured Rashida Tlaib. So I think when we're in a situation right now where Marjorie Taylor Greene, who these supposed anti-imperialists involved with Rage Against the War Machine were whitewashing and saying was so great and promoting, while at the same time condemning the Squad and saying they're pure evil. And again, the Squad are bad and they're pro-imperialists and everything. But when you're in a situation now where everything you said is the opposite in the sense of that now, on this instance, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the most extreme Zionist and the Squad is like mildly critical of Israel, that's like, that completely destroys your argument. And unless you come out and say, okay, Marjorie Taylor Greene on this issue is completely at odds with us and the Squad is actually a little bit closer to us on this. So my previous idea of trying to align with Marjorie Taylor Greene was incorrect. Unless you come out and do that, it's like, it's delusional. It's completely delusional. And yeah. Oh, and for more with Marjorie Taylor Greene, there were protests at the Capitol against Israel's onslaught against Gaza. And she tried to say that, oh, this is an insurrection. This is an insurrection.
Oh my God. It's like the irony. And like, I'll come on the record here and say, like, I don't think that January 6th was a full-on insurrection. Like that. like come on, insurrections go way harder than that, first of all. Second of all, it's like the irony to be a supposed advocate for the January 6th protesters and then turn around and, go to a peaceful sit-in and then call that an insurrection. And also, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that area where they held that sit-in was the part of the Capitol building that was publicly open, open to members of the public. So like, and again, I'm not trying to say that either one was more of an insurrection than the other, because neither of them were. But again, it's so blatantly critical. And then at that same event, she was going around tweeting out like a picture of a screenshot of someone's group chat they had that was named Global Intifada. And she was saying that that's like smoking gun evidence that everyone there is a jihadi and everybody plotting against the good white people of the West to take over their populations and whatever. And it's like, bro, like, I don't think you want to see some of the names of like some of the Discord servers I'm in if you're getting offended by Global Intifada.
Yeah. It's and what it was her attempt to try and criminalize. I mean, it was a pathetic failure because it was so ridiculous. But what that was is a clear attempt to try and criminalize peaceful protests in support of Palestine. And I'm pretty sure the groups that called for that were like, I wouldn't even necessarily call them anti-Zionist per se. Maybe there were some, but a lot of those groups were groups that believe in like two-state solution. They're not like.
I can't speak for all of the groups there, but I can speak for at least Jewish Voice for Peace, saying that I know they're explicitly anti-Zionist. But like again, like the other groups, like If Not Now, or some of the other Jewish centered groups that have been calling for a ceasefire lately, I'm not sure if they're pro two-state or not, which I'm not, because two-state solution is kind of moronic. But
it's debunked at this point. It's completely. There's no way anyone could try and really make that argument at this point. But even so, regardless, it's a clear attempt on her part to try and criminalize the pro-Palestine demonstrations, just completely peaceful pro-Palestine demonstrations. And it really says a lot that supposed anti-imperialists who had this whole holier-than-thou attitude for people that were critical of allying with these sorts of people, supported these people who, 1 minute ago they were supporting them because they were these great anti-interventionists when it comes to Ukraine, supposedly, and now they're just the most extreme Zionists. But
and I just want to ask, have any of those people come out and criticize Marjorie Taylor Greene for being against these protests and being so hyperbolic about the people protesting the Free Palestine, like that they're interventionists? Like anybody who was like in love with her and praising her during the Rage Against the War Machine, are any of those people criticizing Marjorie Taylor Greene right now? Oh, so American Autopsy says no, and I honestly have no idea. It was a genuine question, because I don't pay as much attention to that space anymore, because it's just full of hypocrites, full of tribalists, and full of people who are afraid to call out people with the bigger platforms that they grift off of, like Jimmy Dore. Like these smaller channels, they have their criticisms of Jimmy Dore. They just don't want to say it to their audience because they don't want to lose. They know they have a lot of crossover audience with Jimmy Dore, and they don't want to lose that. So Pal Sarah says they did call Marjorie Taylor Greene out. All right, who did that? Because if they did, then good for them. And I hope that they say that they were wrong. I hope they recognized how they were being inconsistent during the Rage Against the War Machine event, and that they should have known better. Because if they're quick to call out how AOC and the squad are trying to infiltrate protests, then they should also think the same way about these Republican politicians. Yipper, you're saying cough, cough, who? What do you mean by that? Cough, cough, who? What do you mean by that? Jimmy Dore and Pasta are doing the right thing and going in on Tulsi now. This is a difficult game to have to play and sort through. That's the thing is, like, if you're trying, like, if you're looking past, if you're choosing to ignore her pro-Israel stances from before and her what she did in Africa, how she was participating in military operations in Africa just in 2022, it was either 2021 or 2022. If you're willing to look past the fact that she's a politician and the fact that looking past the fact that she is attached to the World Economic Forum and at the very least has a history with the World Economic Forum, if you're willing to look past that during that time, same thing with like RFK Jr. If you're willing to look past that, is it because you want people to come to this protest so that they can see you speak at this protest, so that you can gain a bigger following? Like, you're getting mad at people who are calling out Scott Ritter or Caleb Maupin because you want to gain some of their audience. That's the thing that I saw in this space, and why, like, I left it, because I saw people putting their own career interests over their moral principles, over friendships. A lot of backstabbing. But let's look. Was on Jimmy Dore show and channels close to them, but I hear you though. Okay, let's see. Notice how you don't mind recognizing your faults, Franklin, what you got wrong, but people hate when you do it to others. Right? Like, there has to be, you have to see the transformation that other people go through. Like, for example, Jackson Hinkle jumps from being for mandates, and then all of a sudden jumping to being against mandates because Jimmy Dore was against mandates. All of it became against mandates, or became vocal about how he's against mandates. And then Jackson Hinkle goes from being a Bernie supporter to all of a sudden being like supporting MAGA. Like, he doesn't explain his transformations. Like, they kind of just like pop out of nowhere sometimes, or pop out in response to trends. You get what I'm saying? Like, you don't see a genuine transformation. Instead, you see a response to where current trends are at, and trying to take advantage of where those trends are at, to try to gain more fame, gain more clicks. And then in his case, it's like he has a whole algorithm like helping him out. And then he gets his channel removed by the same algorithm that promotes him. Like, that's control opposition. People can gain fame off of getting their channel removed sometimes if they're still on other platforms. Like, he's not just on YouTube. He's on Rumble, he's on X. Yipper says, I am joking. I was talking about the small channels you mentioned. Do you want me to name them or something? Like, what do you mean? You don't get solidarity, Franco the fraud. What do you mean by I don't get solidarity? Because with politicians, as we were just describing, we shouldn't be trusting them. We're the ones that are supposed to use them. They're not the ones that are supposed to use us, because Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, they use protesters. They use us to promote themselves, to make it seem like they're on our side so that they can gain more votes from other people. American Autopsy, only person I saw hold Marjorie Taylor Greene's feet to the fire on her supposedly anti-war stances with Breonna Joy Gray, when she got her to admit she's not for cutting the military budget. What are you talking about here? Who bought you? Nobody bought me. What are you talking about? And what's making you say that? What's making you say that, black block jock? Not the politicians, you claiming others who ally with other groups. What are you talking about? What other groups? This is what I mean. It's hard to know who to ally with because everyone has screwed up positions, and the problems we face are so dire that they push people in desperate directions. Here's what you guys need to keep an eye out on. Who are the people in this space who are treating this like a career versus who are just doing this as a side, as like a hobby? Like having this channel, for example, for me is a hobby. I do it as a side thing. I have other things in my life going on, personal things going on in my life that I choose to focus on, like family, friends, my own personal growth. I'm not here doing this like as a career. I'm not here like wanting to make money off of this, like how other people are doing. So other YouTube commentators do so. When you start to do that, your judgment gets clouded sometimes. If you're not self-aware of yourself enough, you want to use other commentators or other journalists for their audience so that you can grow, so that you can make more money. It's a survival thing. It's a survival instinct. And that's when you start to see some inconsistencies in people's principles, like people overlooking the stuff that Scott Ritter has done, people overlooking the stuff that people like Caleb Maupin have done. Flame of Liberation says, I think that's Jimmy Dore's all account trolling, or maybe somebody else's. I don't know. Yeah, no problem, Flame. I'm just seeing this now. I was streaming the protest earlier. Hey, that's what's up, man. I'm glad that you're doing that. I don't know. Does it sound like him? These responses kind of do sound like, oh, sure, you're pure. I'm trying to figure out how to respond to this. I would say I went through some things in my life where I felt like I could take a step back and recognize, like, how could what could make me lose awareness in myself and that I see in other people, how they lose awareness in themselves. And when people are using this as a survival, when people are using this like for survival purposes, like trying to make a living off of this, their judgment can get clouded sometimes. And that's when they don't want to they put certain people on pedestals, they put certain journalists and stuff on pedestals. And then when criticism comes out about them, or when issues about them come out, they overlook it. And they don't want to believe them. They don't want to believe the allegations or stories that come out about these people. All right, so at this point, like, Block Jock is just being disrespectful. So I'm not gonna keep responding to that. But like, a lot of people in the independent media space, I feel, are in like survival mode, where they're trying to treat this like as a career, and they're not taking steps back to see, you know, how can they veer off the tracks towards what's the best solution. Why is someone as sharp as you getting stuck in personalities? You mean like the commentators? Because I'm trying to get people who watch this show to reflect more about themselves. But I guess I talked about that enough where it shouldn't be my job, right? I think I pretty much say enough about that. Like, I've talked about that about my gripes with the current state of alt media and independent media, where I don't think I have to say that much anymore. But that's pretty much what I was seeing. Inconsistencies, right? People abandoning friendships, abandoning their moral principles, because they want to get more famous. They want to grow their channel so that they can make more money. So let's hear what Gloria and Flame had to say.
Well, and another point I want to make too is with a lot of these figures, we knew that they were Zionists before Al-Aqsa flood ever happened. So even,
That's right.
You know, obviously now it's different just because like they're just being out in your face with their Zionism. But I mean, we always knew that a lot of these figures were Zionists, with people, you know, like Tulsi Gabbard with her, you know, weird crusade against Islamism, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know, being super pro-Israel as well as extremely pro-national border security, that kind of nonsense. And then like Tucker Carlson as well, huge Zionist, fucking CIA daddy, former Contra too, spent time in Nicaragua too, all of that. Douglas McGregor, another Zionist. Even Scott Ritter collaborated with the Zionist occupation during his time as a UN weapons inspector. And it's like so many other figures. We already knew that these people were Zionists, and we were sitting back telling so much people like, hey, yo, listen, these motherfuckers are opportunists. They're Zionists as hell. Like, please please listen, because they're not actually in this for the right reason. They're just a different of intervention, you know? So, or a different shade of war or whatever. So, oh my God. So it's just so frustrating to see that now they're even more open and just 10 times more repulsive with their commentary on what's happening in occupied Palestine, right? And all you can do is just be like, fucking hold you numbnuts. Like, yeah. And it's like, yeah, they're just spewing the most hateful, disgusting rhetoric. And it's like,
yeah, the most
I don't know what else to say, because
Zionist.
I don't know what else to say, because we knew it was, and we told mother.
All right, so let me respond to something here. All right, so why the stuff with JD? He is what he says he is. What do you mean by that? Or do you mean like a jagoff? Why not hit issues, etc.? The thing is that there are people who will get caught up in the algorithm, and it's not just like with like Jimmy Dore, like it's like Tim Pool and a lot of these other personalities, Bosch. People come in, they find out about injustices happening in the world, and then they come across some of these big channels that are talking about these issues. But then these channels sometimes veer them off the tracks towards what the best solution is. What the best solution is further educating yourself. Voting is not going to solve things because corporations control our voting system. Don't fall for politicians because they're all controlled opposition. So when you have channels like that tell people, oh, this is why I get caught up in drama, like that's just distraction. Like people get caught up in the dramas between personalities, and then they get distracted or they choose sides. We have people like Vosh that tell people we need to vote for Democrats. We have people like Ben Shapiro that say we need to vote for Republicans. And you know all the other ones. And then you have other ones. With third parties, there are more genuine people, I would say. But a lot of them overlook how even with third parties, there's infiltration. And I had a whole discussion about that years ago with people who ran for president in the Green Party, how corrupt that is, how it doesn't really get us anywhere, how even if they do get into Congress, they have to work with the legislation that's presented by the Democrats and Republicans. If they were truly, truly a threat, like if anyone who was running for president was truly, truly a threat, they'd get assassinated, unfortunately. Or they'd get co-opted. So what we have to do in the meantime is keep educating ourselves, keep working on ourselves so that we don't fall into certain psychological traps of whether it be greed, hero worshiping, or not knowing how to deal with certain people, letting yourself get misled by certain people. You can avoid that through self-help, through reading more about philosophy, spirituality, and getting together with your community more, helping out locally more, getting more involved in some of these activist events. The Flame of Liberation says the issue with Jimmy Dore, in my view, is that he leads people astray, specifically into actually serving the establishment. Yeah. I mean, he was look at the double standards he had with like MPP, how that was a waste of time. And no accountability was held there. And then gets caught up with drama with like other channels, like with TYT and with Sam Cedar or with Ryan Grimm. And then other people who come into this space who want to turn this into a career, they kind of leech off of that. And then they're afraid to criticize Jimmy Dore when he's wrong on issues, when he's not talking enough about certain issues, like when there was COVID, or when there was stuff about the Great Reset, until we start to see like other channels gaining more traction when they talk about that stuff. When T-Lab started gaining more traction when he was talking about COVID, or when he started talking about like the Great Reset, then some opportunistic journalists like Max Blumenthal start talking about it. After Whitney Webb and Ryan Christian and other people were talking about these issues, they say, oh, I guess there's a space to talk about these issues. And then they start talking about it. And then they go on Jimmy's show. And then Jimmy starts finally talking about it. And then the smaller channels, like at the time when Jackson Hinkle was smaller, that's when he started talking about it. Doesn't exist as you don't educate, agitate, organize with the people that agree with you 100. You do that with people that need to be educated, agitated, and organized. Yep. Who are you talking about here, Craig? Didn't know this guy is a shit lib. Who are you talking about? What is wrong with people having viewpoints you don't like? There's no problem with that. Except for when they're just like completely misinformed about something and they're not being responsive about it when you do inform them, or when they're infiltrators. Like if they're infiltrators, and that means that they're purposely there to try to miseducate people, to veer people off the right tracks. You based on your comment. Okay, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. A tribalistic response based on my comments on Jimmy Dore and Max Blumenthal. Probably the best journalists around. Did you know that Max Blumenthal pretty much just comes around after other journalists have been talking about things? Whitney Webb was talking about certain issues, and I'm not saying that they haven't done good work before, like Max Blumenthal and Jimmy, but you guys act like they're the gatekeepers of truth. You guys act like there's no other journalists out there. And that's the problem with these algorithms, is that they push you guys into these small spaces to a point where it becomes a cult of personality, to a point in which Jimmy and Max can do absolutely no wrong. Do you see that, Craig? Your automatic response to any criticism on Jimmy or Max is that they're a shit lib. If I were a shit lib, I'd be telling you to vote for Democrats. Is that what I'm doing? I'm not even telling you to vote at all. And that's what Flame of Liberation and Glory are pretty much saying in this interview, is like these people were more interested in their career, because Max Blumenthal and Jimmy weren't out here promoting the Answer Coalition organized protest that happened a few weeks after the Rage Against the War Machine event. They weren't out here promoting the Code Pink protests that happened on October 3rd. They weren't out here talking about the Palestine protests that were happening. And why is that? Because they weren't guest speakers for those events? because it wasn't going to benefit them really in their own growth? Like, are you asking yourself these questions? Are you looking at these inconsistencies in the journalists and commentators that you worship? Oh, Coffee said something interesting earlier. Let me see. Oh yeah, they said, see what happened to them Vanguard boys when they challenged Dorr. They were the first to sniff out Hinkle, Maupin, Ritter. I think that with Hinkle, we kind of sniffed that out around the same time. And actually, me, Nico, we've met like Max Blumenthal and Anya like on like personal terms. Like some of these commentators sometimes, or journalists, when they're in the same places, sometimes like we do hang out. And during that time, Anya didn't like Hinkle. And me and Nico were pretty much warning Max about Hinkle, about how he's an opportunist, and he was seeing it too. But he's still out here legitimizing him. A lot of these, well, not as much anymore, I don't think, but the bigger channels, aside from Jimmy and Max, like a lot of these right-wing channels are legitimizing Hinkle. But Max and Jimmy are still legitimizing this guy. And that, yeah, like Max used to be bad on Syria. And that's the thing. We don't see the transformation. We don't see the accountability of these journalists holding themselves accountable. Max used to be bad on Syria. Then he went to Syria and did a lot of great reporting on Syria since. I'll give him that. The thing is, like, given like who his father is and how his reporting on Syria was used, like Max's reporting on Syria was used during the Obama administration when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State as evidence for, like, his reporting was used as evidence for why they should intervene in Libya. Like, I don't know. Like I the more I learn about this guy and like what his actions now, the less I trust him. And then people are afraid to point that out because they don't want to get attacked by some of you guys, the audience members. Who his father is not a smear, it's a fact. But yeah, I'm gonna finish off here with what Flame and Glory were talking about, and then that'll be pretty much it.
Motherfuckers, it was coming. And it's like, now that it's here, it's like, okay, well, not enough people bothered to stand against this shit. So now we got to deal with it now when it's heightened even more and with even more institutional backing. So at least the masses are standing against it. That's the thing that gives me hope of the day, is that the masses are standing against it, and the masses aren't taking any of that fucking just absolutely hateful rhetoric that a bunch of these right-wing grifters are spewing. So at the end of the day, it's going to sound grim, but at the end of the day, when boomers and Gen Xers die off, it's going to be, boomers are going to be a bit better on resisting Zionism, at least.
Yeah. And you mentioned Douglas McGregor. He's the guy who said, he's on record saying that the U.S. didn't target civilians in Vietnam. And he's got on the record saying that the U.S. is controlled by Marxists. it's sort of similar to how these
Don't
Tulsi
threaten me
Gabbard.
with a good time, Douglas. Like,
Yeah, it's like with the Tulsi Gabbard saying, "Oh, the Democratic Party's beholden to jihadists." It's like, okay, yeah, yeah, you're definitely completely sane and not delusional at all. But I think the positive thing is that, as we were talking about earlier with the protests and stuff going on, these lots of new people are getting into this, and they don't buy into this nonsense. Most people who are pro-Palestine don't fall for this nonsense. I think it's it's really just a few grifters who have a big following online, but when it comes to real people, like the Rage Against the War Machine rally, despite their millions of subscribers, if you add them all together, hardly anyone showed up. Minuscule rally compared to other, rallies that go on, anti-war rallies that go on in Washington, D.C. And probably, honestly, a lot of those subscribers are bots, to be honest, because we saw, and it didn't, they promoted that heavily. It was even promoted by mainstream media. Fox News, Tucker Carlson gave a shout out to it shortly before it happened, telling people to go to it. And despite all of that promotion for such a long period of time, even by mainstream media, Fox News, that's all they could bring together. So I think it's not really as widespread as it might seem online. And I think that's the positive thing. And I think now more and more people are getting involved who don't really have time for this sort of BS.
yeah, it's actually really refreshing that I haven't met a single person on the ground who's like, "Oh, do you watch Jimmy Dore?"
Yeah.
Or sharing like an interview clip from like a Douglas McGregor or something like that. It's actually like it's really refreshing. I will say though, we have had to, at least in South Florida, we have oh my god, I can't talk. We have had to put it out there that Jackson Hinkle is probably a Fed, and also, besides potentially being a Fed, he's also just a blatant grifter in using Palestinian trauma to enrich himself. And also, that motherfucker literally lives in a luxury high-rise in Miami, and I haven't seen him at one pro-Palestine action, despite the fact that they've been happening weekly, and we've been having 2-3 events a week lately. So yeah, that motherfucker is a grifting opportunist, and luckily enough, more catching on to it, especially because you have a lot of crossover between the Black Lives Matter movement and the pro-Palestine movement. And the Black Lives Matter movement are familiar with the likes of Sean King. So obviously, when they see other figures like him, like Hinkle, they go on warn people in the movement about that. And that's been happening, luckily. And again, Jackson Hinkle is another individual who's just been receiving so much algorithmic support, given how far up Elon Musk's ass he is. So yeah,
I think it's clear that people are, and it's so despicable when people try to grift off of this. Give me $3, subscribe to my, or not even subscribe, pay. And where's that money going? I could see like outlets that like do journalism on the ground ask for money because you need money. But when you're just like reposting stuff from other people on Twitter and asking for money, it's really just,
I mean, I know where it's going. It's going to pay rent in the fucking luxury high rise that he lives in Miami. Because if you live in a high rise in Miami, I apologize, but like it's a scientific fact that 98% of people living in luxury high rises in Miami, especially downtown Miami, are complete scumbags. So, yeah.
Well, I think that this situation has really exposed a lot of people, and it's another figure, sort of different from this sort of left-right alliance grift that we've been talking about, but another figure who we knew was bad before, but he just really hit a new low, is Bernie Sanders. He came out on record. Yeah, I know, right? He came out on record saying that he's against a ceasefire, not even calling for an international investigation, not even calling for the Israelis, the Netanyahu and the military and the whole Israeli state, all these people and these politicians calling for genocide, not even calling for them to face justice, not even calling for, you know, the land to be returned to the Palestinians, just a ceasefire. And he is against that. I mean, it's just, we knew he was a Zionist, we knew he was an imperialist, but this is just a new low for him. I just had to mention that because that's.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, like he was always not good, but in the past couple years, he's just been fully cucked, really. And this is definitely a new for him. And, you know, especially him not being able to stand up for Rashida Tlaib or like the squad, who are, again, making the most milquetoast proposals ever with regards to the ceasefire. But it's like, you can't even stand up for that. You're just pathetic at this point.
Yeah, even that's too much. It's really insane. Yeah, I really hope that people learn from this situation and don't fall for these grifting politicians anymore, because we've seen this so many times, and it seems like some people just don't learn. Then again, there's also the fact that a lot of them probably do know, but it's a good financial grift for them to get behind these people. So, but I really think that this time around, it's really exposed these people, and hopefully it's going to be more difficult for these sort of corrupt politicians to pull this stuff in the future, because we've seen this. You know, Obama was the famous example of the politician who said one thing to get elected, then he did the opposite. Is an imperialist warmonger, just like all the other presidents, and we've seen so many other examples of this. But I think this would be a good place to end it. Do you have any final remarks?
Yeah, that was pretty much it. So I'm seeing that people are becoming more aware. From what I've been talking to people in my personal life, like just friends who are not that in tune to politics, like this issue that's happening right now in Palestine has made them like question things more. And this has been like an issue where it's like, yeah, I'm not voting for Democrats anymore, because we're seeing like with a Democrat in office, like they're supporting genocide, even though it's nothing new. But I think this is like the final straw for a lot of people. And like with platforms like TikTok, again, I think people are becoming more aware. It's the age of Aquarius, the age of critical thinking and questioning authority, and just not accepting everything that's being told to you. So I'm hopeful about that. So I did want to. Okay, I'll save this for another video, I think. Yeah, I'll save like what I was gonna say next for another video, but I'm gonna leave it there, guys. Thank you guys very much for watching, and stay informed.